Everybody, I hope you're all keeping well. It's Thursday, sometime near the end of February. I hope you're all keeping well. I'm not one for keeping dates, really. So, the old saying, those the gods make mad, those they wish to destroy. And it's this wave function that began in September 11, 2001, is collapsing into the final stage. And we're getting the repeats or the echoes in a different form from when the wave was in ascendancy from 2001 to 2008, 2009, maybe 2012, because that was when the financial collapse happened. We're witnessing remarkable amounts of madness. This is destruction. The madness that we witnessed on the right in after 9/11, in terms of the world as it was then, was generally like the neocon, mental illness and insanity. On the collapse on this side, it's the globalist and the left. So there's a natural law kind of equilibrium taken over here. And those that the gods wish to destroy, they first have made mad. And this is why it seems so unbelievably insane right now. That the left has become unhinged to the point where it's impossible to even deal with them. So there's no difference between, say, in 2002, when you had housewives in Idaho putting 3M tape and sealant around the doors and windows so Saddam's imaginary weapons, WMDs, couldn't get them, is no different than a lefty now wearing 3 or 4 masks and getting all their latest foghorn leghorns. So a pandemic that only existed on television doesn't get them. Just like the WMDs only existed on television on the beginning of the wave function, could get those ones. And right on cue, all the echoes are bouncing across. The day after I made the previous video, I mentioned the McCanns, and lo and behold, the next day, a woman claiming to be Maddie McCann as an adult shows up. That's obviously a bullshit story, and the family were happy to roll with that because it keeps up the mythology that she's still alive, as well as that poor woman's body was found in England under very strange circumstances that had a lot of sort of like atmospheric, I'd say, atmospheric echoes of the McCann case back in the early 2000s. The strangeness of the whole thing, just everything about it. We also have now, as appeared in the last 2 days, former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, an absolute psychopathic, monstrous war criminal, one of the most evil human beings that has ever existed in my lifetime. And he's now marketing with former Conservative leader William Hague, his so-called adversary, a digital ID system, a social credit score system for people in the United Kingdom. This is absolutely monstrous. People in the UK must fight this with everything they have. This is monstrous. And also, Blair's son owns a company that develops this technology, just like his wife was involved in a firm that was involved in so many of the things to do with the Iraq war. So, and that whole thing. So, the people in the UK, you must fight this. It's with everything you have. But he's back again. William Hague is back again. I'm going to make another prediction here. Watch out for France. The French will somehow intervene in the situation in Eastern Europe. I don't know whether it's to broker a peace deal or whether it's to actually get involved. And Macron is so insane that he would actually put French troops on the ground attacking the Russians, and they are traditional enemies. But I could see that, or I could see a new government coming into France and them brokering a peace deal. But the reason why I say this is, do you remember on the other side of the cycle, we had the whole cheese-eating surrender monkeys thing? The whole cheese-eating surrender monkey thing was a big deal on that side. The French were not actively involved to the level that NATO wanted to be involved in Gulf War II. So you had all these American politicians and newspaper pundits, media pundits calling them cheese-eating surrender monkeys. Well, on this side, they will be involved somehow, I think, in this latest conflict. So watch out. Keep an eye on France. It's like I said last week on the first wave function. Keep an eye on the sky, and then suddenly we had all that nonsense UFO stuff. And this is all the gods making the left mad before it destroys. And that doesn't mean the right are going to come out of this winning. It just means that in equilibrium will settle on the other side. I mean, I was watching an interview with a man from East Palestine in Ohio, and he said that the government don't care about us. They don't care about working class people in East Palestine while they're putting up undocumented migrants in five-star hotels. The same words that came out of that man's voice in Ohio, we've heard it in Dublin, Fermoy, Hastings, Rotherham, Sheffield, you name it, Preston, Manchester, Glasgow, Cardiff. And then the lefties will say that anyone who claims there is a globalist conspiracy to do this are right-wing fascist conspiracy nuts. And here it's exactly happening everywhere. And it's happening for a reason. And the reason is, I don't think the globalists have a reason. I think a lot of it has to do with, for instance, there was a march in Dublin last week, and there was an interview with a guy from the Social Democrats, and he said we haven't even begun to take our fair share of these unvetted, undocumented migrants. Now, the reason for this is they're building a future constituency. They know that people from Western nations are very aware of the history of the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc, and that communism was a catastrophic failure. So they know that any kind of hardcore left-wing political system is lost in the West until they can make the memory of the fall of the Berlin Wall a memory that's forgotten. And right now that's being passed from parent to grandparent to parent to grandchild. And it's going on. So they see all these people coming in as one day going to say, those guys, Sinn Féin fought for me, Labour fought for me, Greens fought for me, Social Democrats fought for me, Christian Democrats fought for me. I'm going to vote for them. In reality, they won't. They will vote for ethnic parties. You will find, like, I'm really surprised there still isn't a major Islamic party in the UK, but it's coming. It's coming. So this is the madness, you know. They think that these people are going to vote for them. When they're not, they're going to vote for parties that ethnically represent them. So these leftists will do two things. They'll destroy the Western nations. Well, they won't. It's not going to happen. They could destroy the Western nations and not gain the constituencies they're hoping to gain from these new demographics. It won't happen because we're heading into a kind of an inverse 9/11 coming at the end of this wave cycle, which I believe will be the complete collapse of the globalists. I know many of you out there and people who are conspiratorially minded think, oh, they have it all planned for the next 500 years. But things go wrong for them. I really do believe now that the whole thing with the COVID pandemic went horribly wrong for them. They did not expect all these deaths that are happening. And even though the media is doing everything to refrain from bringing up the needlecraft, all you have to do is look at the social media. Other than people who are completely drilled dogmatically into the system, everyone else is saying it's the needlecraft. This has been a catastrophic failure for them. This may even be their 9/11. This may even be to the globalists what 9/11 was to Iraq. You know, this could be it. And they're heading towards catastrophic failure. But there's an event is still coming. An event, it's coming in the next 5 or 6, maybe 8, at the max 8 years. It's coming, and it will be as catastrophic on the other side as the 9/11 was, but it won't affect the population, it will affect power structures. You see, the only ones who gained from the 9/11 thing was the aristocrats, the power, the old power systems, the industrial, military industrial complex, the media, politicians, all that kind of thing. But something is coming on the other side. Who knows? It could be even something like a Russian invasion of Europe, and Russia conquers Europe and restores national governments. I'm not saying I want that or it's going to happen, but it'll be something. You have a situation now where, like I said, what's going on in the Ukraine is utterly ridiculous. It's a classic example of what I said at the beginning. The gods make mad those who wish to destroy. The Ukraine, I find it remarkable that all these be kind liberals are expecting every last man, woman, and child in the Ukraine to throw themselves under a Russian tank so they can feel good about flying a blue and yellow flag over their house in Hampstead or in Dublin or in, Chicago, Seattle. It's very kind of those liberals to expect every single person in the Ukraine. And when they give Zelensky huge amounts of money and weapons, what they're saying is use them and die. If I was a Ukrainian person and I saw a Western power coming over and arming him, I'd be like very much, hold on a second, are the West using me as cannon fodder against Russia? And that's exactly what's happening. See, Russia won that war in the first 2 weeks, no problem. They conquered you see, you can't get this truth to the average normie or left, especially lefties, that all the Russians were interested in was those territories in the West, where you had an ethnic Russian majority who were being basically genocided by the Ukrainian government, Zelensky and his gang, or being, horrifically treated. Well, they were being treated similar to the level of, say, Catholics and nationalists were in Northern Ireland in, say, 1968. And that kind of situation, and the Russians went in, and unlike the Irish couldn't do it in 68, but the Russians went in and took care of their own people, their own kind. And those areas have now been legally and statutorily made parts of Russia. So they're no longer part of the Ukraine, they're parts of Russia now. They're autonomous regions were inside the Russian Federation. So they're never giving them up. And like I said the other day, the Russians have 36,000 tanks and the crews to train them. And that's only tanks. They have the best jet fighters in the world. They have unlimited numbers of troops. They have the backing of China. And here's Joe Biden saying, I'm going to give you, the worst one was a man, Sunak, in England, giving them a handful of helicopters. Do you ever see how many helicopters the Russians have? The Russians are treating the Ukraine situation right now in the same way that the Soviet Union treated the Battle of Britain, a little thing on the side. All their energies are not devoted to it. It's all the energies of the West and NATO are devoted to it, but they're just like that. You see, the Battle of Britain, the British think that that was the biggest. They took on the might of the Germans, and I'm not putting down the people who fought in the RAF or anything like that, or the people who suffered in the Blitz and stuff. But that's how it's portrayed in Britain, that the German threw their entire war machine at Britain, and the RAF defeated them. That's not what happened at all. What attacked the Germans devoted very little to the Battle of Britain. It was all in the East, Operation Barbarossa. Well, they're still now. That's what the Russians are like now with Ukraine. They're not particularly. It's okay. We'll deal with that. It's a conflict in the outside, but it's not the. It's they listen to the Western media thinking that the nonsense and they never retract any of it. Like months ago, talking about that Putin was in the bunker ready to commit suicide from this catastrophe. I mean, it's the kind of nonsense but they're taunting him. They're taunting him. All it would take would be one overt NATO incursion into Russia, not Zelensky's army or the Azov's, and you could possibly have a scenario where Russian tanks would be in Calais within 2 weeks, and all of Western Europe would have fallen under Russian hands. Why? Very simply, sure, there's armies in Western Europe don't have any fuel. You cannot. When you have the electricity generated by wind turbines they've already, and what you call it, Biden has already made, and his own mad collapse into madness, bombed Nord Stream 2, and that's cut off the gas to Europe. So all the Russians have to do is send their jet fighters with a few machine guns, take out all the wind farms. Okay, how do you run an army on with no power? How do you run communication systems with no power? Europe would fall in a week. Not because it doesn't have an army, but you could not do field operations when you have no electricity. And that's literally how would they charge their carbon neutral tanks? Literally, that's what Western military is doing right now. They have like battery powered military vehicles. How do you charge them when you've no electricity? And this big Russian diesel guzzling machine that has all the oil, diesel, and petrol it ever needs is coming charging down on you, and you're in your little battery-powered truck saying, Achtung, Achtung, no, 9 power, 9 power. What do you do when this, and behind him is a whole continent full of oil and gas and petrol and diesel, and you're there, is the turbines blowing today? We got to defend it. We got to defend Leipzig. That's madness. Zelensky could take Europe tomorrow. Not Zelensky. He could still do. Putin could take Europe tomorrow. We are so unbelievably vulnerable because of green politics and the likes of Greta Thunberg. And the media putting these people on pedestals, and David Attenborough and all these other people, Brian Cox, I'm not going to do them on the mood today. And they don't always seem, the average moron out there doesn't seem to understand the severity of the situation if the shit hit the fan. And this is part of the wave function collapse. What happened at the beginning of the wave function? Well, the West catastrophically annihilated Iraq. Okay? And they also killed, large numbers of Arab people and Muslim people and brown-skinned people in that region of the world. Through things like sanctions as well. What's happening now to the West? Well, they're getting a taste of what Madeleine Albright did to Iran. They're getting a taste of what the Bush administration did to Iraq. Do you remember in the beginning of that wave function, after 9/11, Bush was making speeches, either you're on our side or you're against us. The coalition of the willing, remember that? Either you're on the side of NATO or you're against us. Well, what we have now. Either you are on the side of this pandemic, or you're a granny killer, or you're a disease spreader. It's the same, it's the left this time. It's the mirror image. It's like that Rorschach test thing. You pull it open. There's the left from the poor part of the wave function, there's the right. So watch out for France. Keep watching the skies. And keep observing the madness. And the most important thing of all is, don't get caught up in it. Emotionally especially. The tribes cannot get caught up in this stuff. You monitor. Think of it, a family next. Think of what's going on in the world as the family down the road that are completely dysfunctional and falling apart. The father's an alcoholic, the wife's screaming all the time, the kids are in bits. It's not good, but it's none of your business. Well, be the same way with the globalists and what's going on in the news and in the world. Observe, recognize, avoid. Remember that? If there's a crazy family down the street, what do? You might say hello to them, but you don't invite them over for tea. The same thing with what's going on in the madness in the news. Do not, under any circumstances, get involved in it. Do not get attached to it. If they don't join peace movements, just observe it and continue on looking after your own family and your loved ones and yourself, especially yourself. Keep yourself clean up here and look at it like it's a video game. That's a very good analogy to video game, because all over YouTube are these short clips of Russian bombers and Russian jet fighters being shot down, and they get like 91 million views. You know what they are? They're from video games. That's now more real. Russian planes being shot down on video games is more normal, is more reality to the average normie than reality. Now we have to be like that with reality ourselves. We have to but purposefully so, not because we're sheep who've been led that way. Part of the way, when the wave function goes down, the last thing you want to be is on that wave. Do not want to be on. You do not want to be on it. The best thing you can do is prepare for it. It's coming, and it's going to take out all the dysfunctionality that arose from the planting of that seed on September 11, 2001. It's going to take it all out. And anyone who's emotionally attached to it, like truthers, if you're still obsessed with how 9/11 happened, it completely, and you're still obsessed with things, now's the time to forget about Building 7. We have moved on. This is the kind of thing. We have to discard any kind, that's irrelevant now. This is being resolved in its own way. You know, those of you who want Nuremberg 2, you won't get it. And pining for it, angry about it, hoping for it, will collapse you in the wave function too. Natural law is taking care of everything now. If you cannot see it, you're not paying enough attention. The world leadership is going completely insane. It's going completely insane because the gods wish to destroy them and what they represent. And you can sit there and go, oh, we're going to please, satanic Illuminati, and all that kind of crap. Okay, you do that. You'll go down with them. Like the other day, there was an earthquake in Turkey and Syria, right? The truthers all come up with their usual bullshit. All these embassies moved their people out the day before the earthquake. No, they didn't, but they shared the memes and everything. That the earthquake was caused by HAARP. Okay, so there was no such thing as an earthquake ever in this world prior to the building of HAARP. That's literally how the truthers are. They literally are like that. So, and yet, I have yet to find one single authentic, plausible, really good document to prove that HAARP causes earthquakes. I know what HAARP is. I know it exists probably before many of you ever existed. I remember reading about it, Mother Jones 25 years ago. I know what HAARP is. I know how it works. I know it can possibly be used to create earthquakes, but these people throw in scalar waves. Scalar waves don't have that kind of power. That's again all truth. You know, so you're all hung up on that earthquake in Syria was caused by HAARP, with no evidence, but it's just that it just fulfills your adrenaline rush. And if you keep thinking and living in that world, you will go down with it. Oh, you will. Now is the time for it to switch gears. You have to, if you want to survive all this, now is the time to merge into another sort of consciousness. And that's really ultimately what's done. What happened was when 9/11 happened, consciousness split in two. Some reality that we're not a part of is continuing on, just like that news report from September 10th. And we're here in the fucking mental post-neocon, present globalist world. And we're kind of, every so often, a Mandela effect. We're getting back like this. We're getting back like this. Okay? But the ones who are stuck in the old paradigm will continue into chaos for the rest of their existence. I'm convinced of it. Nothing could take me away from that belief. Nothing at all. It's because it's so validated constantly. The day after I made the last video, the news reports was some girl claimed to be Maddie McCann. Of course she wasn't, but it's significant because it's an echo. And also that woman's body was found, which is a McCann-esque thing. The cultural manifestations will be seen in reverse. They'll come back in a different form, but a classic Jungian thing that the archetype returns in a new package. And another thing on a personal level, you're going to start encountering people, and they may not be the actual person, but they could be, that you encountered in when the amplitude of the wave was growing between 9/11 and 2012. People and situations in your life then will start to either come back into this part of the cycle in a different way, or the actual person comes back they haven't seen. How do you respond to this? Acceptance. You just go, well, there you go. Data points, reference. Yep, the wave is collapsing. And you will be in very good stead when the next event happens in between 5 and 8 years. You'll be in very good stead. It could happen sooner, but I think that's. I'm trying to. Like, I made a mistake today. I said that Maddie McCann was abducted in 2003. No, she went missed. She was born in 2003. She was abducted in 2007. They were very peak years. The 2003 to 2007 were very, very peak years. Very. That was the when the wave function was going up like that, like a vertical straight line almost. The curve had almost flattened out straight. Well, now we're going on the other side like this now. And we're nearly there. We've just come to the part where it goes down like that. We've just come to it. And the first no, the first indications of that is the madness, the sheer madness that we're subjected to in the world, the crazy making. But that's all. The globalists right now, they're really in panic mode. You can see it. They're very upset they didn't get their way with the scamdemic, and it's deck chairs on the Titanic time for them. And those of you go, oh, they're going to plank down, they're going to come back with this satanic thing. Yeah, you live that way, okay? You spend the rest of your life in the sewer, blaming any group you can for the sadness, for the problems in your life. When you, for the first time in, since pagan times, when people read aeromancy and auguries and portents and science and used all these tools to quantify natural law. You see, this is why it's so similar to the collapse of the collapse of the old pagan classical world. In the years leading up to the end, in the last few decades of the classical pagan world, the people in Greece and Rome knew something was coming. They knew they acted and they went mad. I'll give you an example, like the Dismanibus cult, where they began to worship the dead. In fact, Dismanibus became the kind of the engine of early Christianity. But it's a lot like that. And a lot of the things were like that. And it took 300 years really for Christianity to rise up again. So there's a 300-year probably space now, really, between now and us being fucked over again. So we really could be heading for a wonderful age, because chaos within chaos creates the fermentation of new thinking and new ideas. You see, this is why I don't ever want to live in a world of peace and love. A world of peace and love would be like being on life support. You have to have conflict, schisms. You have to have friction in order to create new tangents of creativity and new modes of reality. I know there's people say, "Oh, we were brought up to believe that like we should have peace and love and everyone live together." No, you weren't. That's a whole hippie thing that only just developed from pop music in the '60s on, and was quite almost certainly invented by Tavistock. You remember that commercial with Coca-Cola, all the cult members on the hill? I'd like to teach the world to sing. That's why you believe that peace and harmony should exist, because of a corporation called Coca-Cola. That's why. And I filtered into pop music and rock music. The reality is, we'll always, you see, the bands that like the death metal bands and the metal bands that did songs about like war and stuff, they were closer to reality than anyone. That's why they're the happiest people in that scene, because they understand natural law. And also just because there's friction, schisms. What's your job? Your job is to survive. What does survival depend upon? It's staying out of the way. And that's what I'm saying. Stay out of the way of the collapsing wave function. So things will happen, say, next week. Oh, something's happened in the world. I've got to put my emotions into it. Why? Well, because this has happened. Why have you got to put your emotions into it? What do you gain by fretting over Ukraine? Oh, there we go. Cole Porter song. What do you? No, it's more like a Frank Sinatra. What do you gain by fretting over Ukraine? Oh yeah, you don't get no good, no good. Don't fret. Zelensky is a zero, and I'm not sure that Putin is a hero. But don't you fret over Ukraine. You know, it'd be like that kind of thing. See, that's how you deal with it. That you don't become emotionally attached to it. You see it as the theatre of the absurd that it is, you know. I mean, isn't that how we got through the scamdemic? Isn't that how we all avoid the needlecraft? Just wait, but also observing it rather than letting it washing over us and sucking us dry. There's a lot to be said. There's an awful lot to be said for apathy in these situations. And everything in my lifestyle growing up, they used to give us these boxes for throw care and concern. They were third world charities before it was called before they called it the developing world. It was called the third world, and you had to raise money for starving babies in Africa. And they gave you this like a far cardboard box that folded over, and you're supposed to stand in the weather shaking the box. Pennies for the black babies, this kind of thing in Africa. Pennies for Biafra. Pennies for it was always Ethiopia, and we didn't have fucking shit. So I used to, very early on, I realised that those charities were scams, because the guy from Concern would be driving up to the school in a Mercedes to deliver the cardboard boxes. So I just started taking the money out of him and saying, "Oh no, I only made 50 pence, when I made like £3 or something." And all the kids in our school were doing it, and they were all heroes for doing it. Because none of that money was going to Africa. It was all going to, a lot of it was paying for actually Catholic priest sex tourism in Africa. You know that? All that throw care and concern money was paying for Catholic priest sex tourism. And we all know about your man Casey in Galway, that he was funding his mall and driving around in a convertible Mercedes on that money that the kids were shaking the box. And yeah, so that's what I've learned from earlier. I didn't charge this, but also, why do they brainwash us through that, like the TV news every night? Some TV reporter, this is something camp in Ethiopia. There are over 300,000 people who are fleeing from the war, and you'd look at this and you go, Jesus, that's awful, those poor people. And the whole thing was, and then there'd be an ad for a charity or Bob Geldof and stuff like that. When in reality, one Western government, even a poor Western government, could allocate huge amounts of money without even asking the taxpayers to solve that refugee crisis in Africa, just get them, and without doing anything else, just to keep them alive and keep them safe. But no, it was up to us. We had to get emotionally dragged into it. And you see with all those wildlife programs, the noble lion, is now being, or the best ones would be like, this polar bear is running out of polar. If we don't get the polar bear more polar, there won't be any more. And you're sitting at home, well, fuck the polar bear. The greatest thing you can do to wake up is look at that stuff and go, okay, whatever. Oh, the poor people suffering over there. It's terrible. What are you doing? I'm going to the pub. You see how Sinn Féin has used the whole Palestinian thing to blind people in this country to the jihadists. When the first jihadist attack happens in Ireland, the first big major one happens, Sinn Féin and its supporters will be directly responsible, because they blinded people to the dangers of jihad. And when he saw them in the march in Dublin, there was not once among Sinn Féin, there wasn't a single Irish tricolour, but there was nothing but rainbow flags, the swastika of the regime, and the Palestinian Hamas flag, over there. And they call themselves the Republican Party, Nationalist Party. And you couldn't make the shit up. And that's all madness. That's all their descent into madness. You know, a Sinn Féiner who's grown up on Wolf Tones records now thinks that the only thing in his life that matters is to get people from the Middle East into homes in Ireland and displace Irish people. That's nationalism to them now. The gods make mad first those whom they wish to destroy. And the same thing with the paedophiles. Paedophiles have always tried to. See, you have to remember that the political system is absolutely stinking with paedophiles. Stinking with them. This is why. Think about this. Whatever country you come from, whether it's any country you come from, when was the last time you heard a major politician in your country stand up and make a speech against paedophilia? They'll make speeches about everything else, but will they make a speech about the sexual exploitation of children? Because they're all paedophiles. The bureaucrats, the civil servants in every country is loaded with paedophiles. It's the number one employment agency in the world for paedophiles is civil service and government jobs. Number one. Because they're jobs for life. They can download kiddie porn and the union won't do anything to the union will protect them if they get caught with like kiddie images on their laptops. So they all end up in the civil service for that reason. And they want that extra stripe on their swastika, their rainbow swastika. They want that one extra stripe. Every so often, they nearly got it in the 70s with the NAMBLA thing in America. Remember George Dukakis? He ran for president of the United States. Remember that? He was marching with them in Boston when I think he was governor of Massachusetts, I think. Maybe I'm wrong with that, but he was caught marching with them. NAMBLA, the North American Boy Love Association, or whatever it's called. And then you had the Paedophile Information Exchange in the late 70s, PI, who were openly on television talking about what we do is not wrong, it should be tolerated. And now we have a situation in Ireland with the Minister for Peter Tatchell running the schools here. Every so often they make a go for it. And they really think this is their... See, this is one of the reasons they want open borders. If they can make minorities of everything, right, this is what the left's agenda is. The left's agenda is very strongly driven by paedophilia. If they can make a minority of everything, that will include making a minority of what? Nonces, okay? And then nonces are then protected under minority rights and minority laws. You cannot separate the open borders issue from the paedophilia issue, legalizing paedophilia issue. Every single one of those people who marched in Dublin on Saturday, every single one of them must be are paedophile activists, because the two things go hand in hand like that as well. Open borders and paedophile activism go hand in hand. You will see the same thing, because they're also trying to bring in people from cultures that marry 9-year-old girls. But look, we have people in our community here who marry 9-year-old children. What is wrong with a 45-year-old man having a healthy sexual relationship with a 4-year-old boy? It's racist not to. It's racist to these other communities. That's what you cannot separate the open borders thing from the paedophilia thing. The two of them go hand in hand. That one extra stripe on the rainbow swastika is being driven by the open borders agenda. But again, it's failing. This is the gods make mad those whom they wish to destroy. That's why the schools are full of paedophile groomers and everything else. I mean, I don't know how anyone can send their kids to a regular school today. I just don't believe. I mean, they're just paedophile and Marxist brainwashing machines. And I'm not telling parents how to raise their kids, but this is the beginning of the collapse, the madness. The important thing is, just like we saw him making that jokes Frank Sinatra song earlier on, is not to get emotionally sucked into it. This is always going... The Achilles heel of the leftist, of the globalist, and to a certain extent the right-wing nuts, is that they become extremely emotionally entrenched. I've spent the last few days on a democratic memes board of people who vote Democrat liberals in the United States, and a board full of memes. And they are some of the most hateful, poisonous people I've met in my life. They all talk about how the right is all a land of hatred and all this, and then you look at their board and you see pictures of like DeSantis in a coffin and his wife, and they're all tumming it up and laughing over it, while they're talking about they're the ones who represent love. They're just completely insane. They're completely mad. And it's quite apparent. And you look at that and you go, okay, that's some great data there. I know exactly what I'm dealing with. And you remember, it's not a right or left wing thing. They're both scum. I'm just saying that right now the left is the one. The left is the drowning man. You see, in the beginning of the wave function, the right wing and the neocons were the drowning man that were pulling us decent people to the bottom of the sea. Now it's the left wing and the progressives. They're now the drowning man. But the gods have made mad those they wish to destroy. And so don't get too hung up on it. Very important. Laugh at them, laugh at them, mock them. I mean, they're destroying themselves. I mean, they're absolutely destroying themselves. And that wave function, it continues, and we'll make another video on this soon. I mean, I don't make videos every day because that would I'm not one of these people that talk just for the sake of it. But I'm not, so I'll wait for, every so often something interesting comes up. And you guys in your comments are great for bringing my attention to things. But I'll leave what I said earlier on in the video. Keep an eye on France in the next few years, pertaining to what's going on in the Ukraine war. The cheese-eating surrender monkeys will ferment into something else. And also, people and situations that occurred in your life when the cycle was going up will appear as either echoes, reflections, or the actual person themselves on the way down. And what do you do with that? Do you get upset about it? No, you just say, data points. Remember, auguries. We have to be like our ancient pagan ancestors, where this is one of the reasons we never fell for the climate change bullshit, because we look at the countryside and go, looks exactly the same as it did when I was a kid. In every way. What's the problem? Sanguine gnosis. Love all you fucking bastards.